The billionaire pretended to be asleep to test his black maid, but what he saw left him paralyzed. Richard Blackwell leaned back in his Italian leather armchair and closed his eyes, breathing slowly to simulate deep sleep. On his executive desk, deliberately scattered, were $15,000 in $100 bills, a fortune that for most people would represent months of hard work. The office door opened softly. Diana Washington, 34, entered, pushing her cleaning cart with her usual discretion. 3 weeks ago, she had started as a cleaning lady at the Beverly Hills mansion, replacing the previous employee who had been mysteriously fired for alleged theft. What Richard didn't know was that Diana had been preparing for this very moment. While he pretended to be asleep, she looked at the dollars scattered across the table with an expression that mixed sadness and something that looked like amusement. Slowly, she began to carefully gather the bills, organizing them into perfectly aligned stacks. Richard controlled his breathing, waiting for the moment when she would hide the money in her uniform. But Diana did something completely unexpected. She took a yellow Post-it note from her backpack and wrote something with her own pen. She stuck the note right in the center of the stacks of money and continued cleaning the office, humming softly a gospel song that echoed gently through the silent room. The billionaire needed all his willpower not to open his eyes at that moment. What the hell had she written on that piece of paper? 20 minutes passed. Diana finished cleaning, organized her materials, and left the office without touching the money again. The door closed softly. Richard jumped up like lightning and ran to the desk. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the yellow Post-it note. The message, written in neat handwriting, left him completely speechless. "Mr. Blackwell, your money was messy. I organized it for you. P.S. My grandmother always said that tested money is wasted money." How on earth did she know? In 15 years of administering this test to employees, no one had ever suspected it was intentional. But Diana not only figured it out, she had the audacity to leave a handwritten moral lesson on his desk. The billionaire crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash, angry at himself for feeling something like respect. No, that woman was clearly mocking him, and Richard Blackwell did not tolerate disrespect from anyone, least of all a cleaning lady who earned in a year what he spent on wine in a weekend. The next day, he decided to up the ante. He left his laptop open in the living room with confidential company emails on the screen and a fake document about upcoming layoffs. Any normal employee would rush to read the information or at least be curious. Diana came in, saw the computer, carefully closed the screen, and continued cleaning. Richard watched on the security monitors, perplexed. On Tuesday, he forgot his unlocked cell phone on the couch with conversations about apparent million-dollar investments. Diana arranged the cushions around it without even looking at the screen. On Wednesday, he left an open wallet with unlimited credit cards scattered across the coffee table. She carefully organized them inside the wallet and closed it. Each failed test made Richard more obsessed. Who was this woman? Diana Washington had grown up on the east side of Detroit, the daughter of a nurse and a mechanic who died when she was 16. But what Richard didn't know was that she had lost much more than a father at that time. 3 years ago, Diana's younger brother, Marcus, worked as an intern at one of Blackwell Corporation's subsidiaries. A brilliant young man, he had graduated with honors in accounting and had reported irregularities in the company's books. A week after the report, Marcus was fired for stealing office supplies, a false accusation based on pens and notepads that all employees took home. The dismissal for cause ruined his chances of getting another job in the field. Marcus fell into depression, lost his apartment, and developed alcohol problems. Diana watched her brother, the boy who always got top marks, who dreamed of being an accountant, who sent half his salary to his mother, slowly destroy himself. The funeral was 18 months ago. It was at the wake that Diana found, among Marcus's personal belongings, a folder with copies of documents he had kept before being fired, detailed evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and bribes that directly involved Richard Blackwell. From that moment on, getting a job at Blackwell's mansion was no longer about money, it was about justice. Diana had studied the billionaire's every move for months before applying for the job. She knew about his cruel psychological tests, his paranoia about employees, his history of destroying people who challenged him. She knew he thought he was untouchable, protected by expensive lawyers and political influence. What Richard didn't suspect was that while he played cat and mouse, Diana was discreetly photographing documents, copying files left open, and recording compromising phone conversations he made in the living room, thinking he was alone. On Thursday, Richard decided to be even more direct. "Diana," he said, entering the kitchen where she was making coffee, "I need to know, have you ever been tempted by opportunities here at home?" She stared at him with those calm eyes that irritated him so much. "Opportunities for what, Mr. Blackwell?" "You know what I'm talking about. Information that's worth money, objects that no one would miss, contacts that could benefit you." Diana continued stirring the sugar into his coffee as if they were discussing the weather. "Mr. Blackwell, my grandmother always said one thing. Those who seek fake gold never find real diamonds." Richard felt a vein throbbing in his forehead. "And what does that mean?" "It means that maybe you're looking for the wrong things and the wrong people." She poured the coffee into a fine porcelain cup, placed a napkin folded into the shape of a swan next to it, a small artistic touch that left Richard even more confused, and left the kitchen humming the same gospel song as always. That night, Richard called his head of security.
"I want a full investigation into Diana Washington. Financial history, criminal history, personal history, everything. And I want to know why a woman with this profile is working here." The report arrived the next day, and for the first time in years, Richard Blackwell felt something akin to remorse. Diana was poor, yes, but she had an exemplary, clean record. She had a degree in business administration from community college, previous jobs with impeccable references, and was a single mother supporting a 12-year-old daughter and her own sick mother. She volunteered at a homeless shelter on weekends. But there was something else in the report that made Richard frown. Diana had a younger brother who had worked briefly for one of his companies and had recently died. Richard couldn't remember the specific case, but something about that information bothered him deeply. Each new humiliation he tried to impose on Diana only strengthened something inside her that he couldn't see. A quiet determination fueled by the very injustice he was trying to perpetuate. What this privileged man didn't know was that each act of contempt was writing his own sentence, while Diana carefully documented every piece of evidence that would put him behind bars forever. On Friday, Richard decided to take the game to a whole new level. "Diana, I need you to organize a party here at the house for tomorrow night," he announced, entering the room where she was folding bedding. 20 people, full dinner. I want to impress some investors." Diana showed no surprise, even though she knew perfectly well that this was yet another cruel test. Organizing a formal event in less than 24 hours was impossible for anyone, especially without an adequate budget. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell. Any menu preferences?" The calmness in her voice irritated Richard. "Surprise me. And Diana, don't disappoint. These men move millions. They're not used to simplicity." What Richard didn't know was that Diana had spent 3 years organizing charity events at church, feeding hundreds of people on ridiculous budgets. More importantly, she had finally found the ally she needed. On Saturday morning, a blue Honda Civic pulled discreetly into the back entrance of the mansion. Out stepped James Carter, 45, a former FBI agent specializing in financial crimes. He currently works as a private investigator, but had taken this case pro bono after Diana showed him the evidence she had found. "Are you sure about the documents?" James asked, checking to make sure no one was watching them. "Absolutely, and there's more. Last night he received a call from Senator Morrison about a construction project in Southern California. I recorded everything." James nodded, impressed. "Diana, you know what you're doing is dangerous. Blackwell has powerful connections." "My brother thought he had connections too. He thought the truth would protect him." As they talked, Diana showed James the house's security system, which he had studied for weeks. She knew every blind spot, every camera, every moment Richard left for his morning runs. His office is unlocked for exactly 17 minutes every morning when he showers after his run. That's when I photographed the documents. James shook his head in admiration. "You should work for the government." "I prefer to work for justice." That afternoon, Diana transformed the house.
simple but elegant flowers, strategically placed candles, a table that looked like it came out of a magazine. The menu, grilled salmon with mushroom risotto, was executed with military precision. At 7 p.m., the first guests began to arrive. Men in expensive suits, women wearing jewelry that cost more than entire houses. Richard circulated among them with obvious pride, as if he were personally responsible for every perfect detail. "Blackwell, your staff is impressive," commented Senator Morrison, watching Diana serve champagne with professional discretion. "Where did you find this gem?" "Oh, you know how it is. Sometimes we find diamonds in the most unexpected places," Richard replied with a condescending smile. Diana pretended not to hear, but her hands tightened imperceptibly around the tray. Every word those men spoke was being recorded by the device James had strategically planted under the main table. During dinner, conversations flowed between expensive wines and shady deals. Richard and his guests openly discussed money laundering schemes, bribes to public officials, and even threats to investigative journalists. "The problem with these reporters," said Morrison, cutting his salmon, "is that they don't understand that certain truths are inconvenient for progress." "That's why we have lawyers," Richard laughed, "and other methods when lawyers aren't enough." Diana served the second course with a neutral expression, but inside she felt a mixture of horror and satisfaction. Every word was being captured, every admission of guilt documented. After everyone had left, Richard called her into the living room. "Impressive, Diana. Really impressive." He poured himself a whiskey, clearly satisfied. "Perhaps I underestimated your abilities." "Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Actually, I'm thinking about a promotion. How about managing some of my corporate events? It would pay much better than cleaning bathrooms." Diana stared at him with that calmness that disturbed him so much. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm happy with my current job." Richard frowned. "Happy cleaning houses? Please, Diana, be realistic. People like you don't have many options in life. This is a golden opportunity." "People like me? You know, women of your social standing, single mothers without a college education. The real world is cruel, but I'm offering you a chance to escape mediocrity." The silence that followed was tense. Diana took a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Blackwell, my grandmother always said that we shouldn't confuse opportunity with charity, and that sometimes accepting charity from certain people is more expensive than anyone can imagine." Richard laughed bitterly. "Your grandmother seems to have a saying for everything. She must have been a very wise woman for someone from your background." "She was. And she also said that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them the first time." Something about the way Diana said it made Richard uncomfortable, but he dismissed the feeling. After all, what could a cleaning lady do against him? The next day, a Sunday, Diana didn't go to work. It was her day off, but she wasn't resting. At a small cafe in downtown Los Angeles, she met with James to review the previous night's recordings. "This is pure gold," James said, listening for the third time to the conversation about bribing the senator. "We have enough material to take down not only Blackwell, but half of the city's elite political circle." Diana nodded, but there was something else in her gaze. "James, you need to understand something. I don't just want justice for my brother. I want the whole world to see the kind of man Richard Blackwell really is, beneath all that philanthropic facade." "What do you have in mind?" "His annual charity ball is next Friday. 300 people from high society, live broadcast, cameras from all the local news channels. He asked me to coordinate the event." James raised his eyebrows. "And you're going to accept?" "Oh, I already have, and it's going to be a night no one will ever forget." On Monday, Diana returned to work as usual. Richard, still intoxicated by the success of the party, seemed more relaxed and confident. "Diana, about Friday's charity ball," he began, adjusting his tie in the hall mirror. "I want you to take care of all the details. It will be my gift to you, a chance to shine in society." "Very generous, Mr. Blackwell. And Diana, wear a nice dress. I don't want you to feel out of place among my guests." She smiled sweetly. "Don't worry, I have exactly what I need." What Richard didn't know was that Diana had spent the previous night studying every detail of the sound system at the hotel where the event would be held. She knew every microphone, every speaker, every audio input, and the dress she planned to wear. It was the same one her grandmother had made, especially for her college graduation, the degree she earned by studying at night while raising her daughter alone, the same degree Richard assumed she didn't have. Throughout that week, while Richard strutted through the halls of the mansion talking about his generosity in giving Diana a chance, she was finalizing preparations for something much bigger than revenge. It was justice served on a silver platter, seasoned with the arrogance of the very man who was about to lose everything. For a moment, when Richard laughed at her on Sunday, talking about people like you, all the demons of prejudice danced freely around him. But what that privileged man couldn't see was that every condescending word, every look of superiority was being carefully cataloged and archived by someone who understood perfectly the power of strategic patience. On Friday night, the Grand Hotel Beverly Hills sparkled like a palace. 300 of California's most influential people arrived for the Blackwell Corporation's annual charity ball. Journalists from all the local channels positioned their cameras as celebrities and politicians paraded down the red carpet. Richard walked among his guests like a king in his kingdom, wearing his custom tuxedo and triumphant smile. At 52, he was at the height of his power. Senator Morrison at his side, Mayor Williams laughing at his jokes, billionaire businessmen vying for his attention. "Blackwell, you've outdone yourself this year," Morrison commented, observing the impeccable decor. "Your team is truly exceptional." "Ah, I discovered a rare gem," Richard replied, nodding to Diana, who was discreetly coordinating the waiters. "Sometimes we find talent in the most unexpected places." Diana wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, the same one her grandmother had sewn for her graduation. She moved around the party with professional efficiency, checking every detail. What no one knew was that she was also checking that every strategically placed microphone was working perfectly. At 9 that evening, Richard took the center stage. The lights dimmed, cameras focused on him. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual event to benefit the underprivileged children of Los Angeles," he began, his voice echoing through the hall via the sound system. "As always, our company believes in giving back to the community." Diana watched from the back, her heart racing. In her hand, she held a small device, the same one James had connected to the main audio system. "This year, we are raising funds to build schools in underserved neighborhoods," Richard continued. "We believe that education is the path to lifting people from disadvantaged backgrounds to a better life." That was when Diana pressed the button. Richard's voice continued to come out of the speakers, but it was no longer his words about charity.
It was the recording of the private party from the week before. The problem with these reporters is that they don't understand that certain truths are inconvenient for progress. That's why we have lawyers and other methods when lawyers aren't enough. Richard's face contorted in pure horror as his own voice admitting corruption and bribery echoed through the hall. He rushed to the microphones, trying to turn them off, but Diana had disconnected all the local controls. "People like you don't have many options in life. This is an opportunity to escape mediocrity." The room fell into deadly silence. Television cameras captured every word, broadcasting live to the entire city. Cell phones were raised everywhere, recording the collapse in real time.
Your grandmother seems to have a phrase for everything. She must have been a very wise woman for someone from your family." Senator Morrison stood up abruptly, his face red with rage. "Richard, what the hell?" But the recording continued. Now it played back the conversations about money laundering, the threats to journalists, the bribes to public officials. Every crime that Richard and his guests had confessed to in the imaginary safety of his mansion now echoed around the world. Diana walked calmly to the stage, took the central microphone that was still working, and spoke in a clear, firm voice. "My name is Diana Washington. 3 years ago, my brother Marcus was fired from Mr. Blackwell's company for reporting irregularities in the accounting books. He was falsely accused of theft to silence his honesty." Richard tried to approach her, but hotel security guards, who James had discreetly instructed, stopped him. "Marcus became an alcoholic, lost everything, and died of an overdose 18 months ago at the age of 28, Diana continued, her voice breaking slightly. "He was an accountant, graduated with honors, and dreamed of helping honest companies prosper." The crowd listened in absolute silence. Some people began to cry. "During these months working here, I have collected evidence of crimes that include money laundering, tax evasion, bribery, and intimidation of honest employees. All of these recordings, along with photographic documents, have already been handed over to the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service." Richard was pale as a ghost. "Diana, please." "Mr. Blackwell," Diana interrupted, looking directly at him, "my grandmother always said that the truth is like water. It finds its way to the surface. Marcus tried to do the right thing and was destroyed for it. Today, the truth has finally come to the surface." The doors to the hall opened simultaneously. Federal agents entered in formation, heading directly for Richard and several of his guests, including Senator Morrison. "Richard Blackwell," announced the lead agent, "you are under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, bribery, and conspiracy against justice." As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Richard looked at Diana with a mixture of despair and bitter admiration. "How a woman of our social standing learned to use your words against you?" Diana replied with serene dignity, and discovered that sometimes the best revenge is simply to let the truth speak for itself. The hall erupted in shouts, camera flashes, and total confusion. Journalists shouted questions, guests rushed for the exits, phones rang incessantly with calls from desperate lawyers. James appeared beside Diana, smiling proudly. Marcus would be proud. As Richard was led away in handcuffs across the same red carpet where he had walked triumphantly an hour earlier, Diana remained on stage, watching. There was no malicious glee on her face, only the serenity of someone who had finally seen justice done. The live broadcast captured it all: the arrest, the recorded confessions, Diana's testimony.
Within minutes, the hashtags Justice for Marcus and Truth Unlocked were trending nationally. Outside, as crowds gathered to watch more federal agents arrive, a reporter approached Diana. "What's next for you?" Diana smiled for the first time in months. "Now I'm going home to hug my daughter and tell her that sometimes when we fight for the truth, the whole world can change." The story was far from over. In the next 24 hours, Diana's life would be transformed in ways even she could not predict, while Richard's empire crumbled completely. But at that moment, standing on the stage where justice had finally triumphed, she knew that Marcus could finally rest in peace. 6 months after the scandal that rocked Beverly Hills, Diana Washington was in her new office on the 22nd floor of a commercial building in downtown Los Angeles. The sign on the door read, "Washington Consulting, Ethical Auditing for Businesses." Through the large window, she could see the city stretching to the horizon. Her phone rang constantly, companies wanting to hire her services to avoid the same fate as Richard Blackwell. The federal investigation had uncovered a corruption scheme involving dozens of businessmen and politicians. Richard was sentenced to 15 years in prison for money laundering, tax evasion, and conspiracy.
His assets were confiscated, his company went bankrupt, and he now lived in a 2-square-meter cell. Senator Morrison resigned in disgrace. Mayor Williams was impeached. 3 judges were removed from office. The Diana Washington case became a milestone in the fight against corporate corruption. "Mom," said Keisha, now 13, entering the office with a beaming smile. "The teacher said you're going to speak at her school next month." Diana smiled, hugging her daughter. Keisha now attended one of the best private schools in the city, paid for with funds from the new company and settlements from lawsuits. On Diana's desk, a framed photo showed Marcus at his graduation. Next to it was a note she had kept from the hospital where he died. "Tell my sister that one day the truth will come out." James came in shortly after carrying a briefcase.
Diana, we just got another case. A black employee at a tech company is being harassed after reporting sexual harassment by the CEO. "We'll help her," Diana replied without hesitation. "That's exactly what the Marcus Washington Foundation is for." The foundation, created with part of the compensation money, had already helped 23 people report corporate injustices, providing legal, technical, and emotional support to those who did not have the resources to fight alone. Across town, Richard Blackwell sat in his cell reading a magazine that featured Diana on the cover, the woman who toppled an empire of corruption. The article talked about how she had turned her traumatic experience into a life mission. Richard crumpled the magazine in anger. Even in prison, he couldn't accept that he had been defeated by someone he considered inferior. But Diana had learned something Richard would never understand. True strength does not come from humiliating others, but from lifting up those who have been unjustly brought down. That Friday afternoon, Diana visited Marcus's grave. She placed fresh flowers on it and whispered, "We did it, little brother. The truth finally came out." The wind gently swayed the trees in the cemetery, and for a moment, Diana felt as if Marcus were there, proud of his sister who had turned his death into life for so many others. Richard tried to destroy Diana, but ended up creating the woman who would save dozens of other victims. Diana learned that true revenge is not to repay the harm done to you. It is to achieve success that your enemies could never imagine. If this story of courage and justice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments. Have you ever faced an injustice that made you stronger?